Picture a chaotic boardroom or a tense tactical standoff. A single figure steps into the room and the frantic energy instantly evaporates into rigid compliance. No weapons are drawn, no threats are made. This obedience represents a biological override, triggered long before the conscious mind can intervene. To understand why human beings routinely submit to authority without physical coercion, we have to look at how our brains manage an overwhelming influx of information. The brain is an energy-hungry organ, and it has evolved ruthless mechanisms to conserve glucose and metabolic power. This cognitive schematic illustrates dual-process theory, mapping our energy management. It divides cognition into two distinct nodes. System 1 is a fast, automatic network scanning for social cues with zero effort. System 2 is the brain's heavy machinery, a dense, high-energy analytical core. Because it consumes massive energy, System 2 remains in a lazy default mode, adopting the rapid conclusions generated by System 1. This division of labor is highly efficient, but it creates a structural vulnerability. Because the analytical node is so easily bypassed, the human mind is systematically prone to accepting high-status social signals without engaging in critical deliberation. In a hierarchical setting, compliance functions as an evolutionary heuristic, a biological shortcut designed for cognitive efficiency rather than reasoned agreement. If compliance is an automatic response, the trigger is what tactical and organizational trainers call command presence. This is a highly structured, executable physical methodology, designed to signal credibility before a word is spoken. Looking at this anatomical wireframe, we see the foundational physical marker of authority: structural stability. It begins with a tall, erect spine, open shoulders, and evenly distributed weight. This grounding sends an immediate neurological signal of control. Below the neck, authority is regulated through deep, diaphragmatic breathing. Expanding the lower abdomen actively lowers cortisol levels, contrasting with the shallow chest breathing of an anxious profile. In the face, presence requires triangular eye contact. The gaze rhythmically shifts between the listener's eyes and mouth, projecting sincerity without intimidation. These high authority markers are the inverse of low authority signals. A forward craning neck, constant weight shifting, or rapid, erratic hand movements physically broadcast cognitive strain and a lack of control to the observer's automatic brain. To project absolute control over the physical self, every gesture must appear intentional. This is stillness with purpose, where extraneous movements like fidgeting or pacing are eliminated to signal stability. The vocal mechanics of authority reinforce this physical stillness. Leaders speak at a steady, deliberate pace, punctuated by purposeful pauses, often using a descending pitch at the end of sentences to establish finality. These physical and vocal techniques actively de-escalate volatile situations. They establish psychological safety and order long before the listener has logically processed the message. True authority is projected through these precise, observable biological indicators, often gaining control over a situation without the need for physical escalation. The cognitive mechanics behind this automatic deference were extensively mapped by behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman. His work on the dual system framework exposed how our brains systematically process social cues. Kahneman demonstrated that our cognitive biases are actually deliberate shortcuts executed by the fast-thinking node to bypass expensive analytical processing. This diagram illustrates the moment of biological override. It occurs when the brain scans external somatic status signals, the tall posture, the steady gaze, and the controlled voice. The fast-thinking System 1 instantly locks on to these status cues. It categorizes the messenger as a credible authority and accepts incoming information as correct, often without substantial evidence to support the claim. Simultaneously, the analytical core dims. This is the bypass, where critical evaluation is dropped to conserve the metabolic energy required for deep thinking. This neurological vulnerability is known as authority bias. Under its influence, the brain finds it difficult to detach the content of a message from the perceived status of the person delivering it. The halo effect compounds this, allowing a positive impression of a leader's status to automatically validate their statements across unrelated domains. When an individual successfully projects high status, the group's critical thinking engines can systematically power down, making even highly intelligent teams capable of catastrophic errors. We can measure the depth of this vulnerability by looking at the anchoring effect, which shows how easily the automatic brain is corrupted by arbitrary information supplied by an authority. In one classic experiment, subjects were asked if Mahatma Gandhi was older or younger than 114 years old when he died. That arbitrary, extreme number anchored the subject's fast-thinking node, causing their subsequent estimates of his actual age to skew significantly higher than logic would dictate. In the modern boardroom, the anchor is rarely a random number. It is the phenomenon known as the HIPPO, or the highest paid person's opinion. This information flow diagram shows what happens when a high-status individual injects an opinion into a meeting. That statement becomes an unmovable anchor. Valid data points and alternative perspectives flowing upward are systematically blocked by that single authoritative node. Driven by a biological urge to maintain cohesion and avoid the friction of dissent, group members often alter their own data to align with the authoritative anchor. This results in groupthink, where social harmony and status deference override independent analysis and critical thinking. Organizations routinely fail because the automatic brain prefers the metabolic safety of submitting to an anchor over the energy-intensive work of independent analysis. To understand why we submit, we must look back at evolutionary anthropology. The human drive for social rank was forged by survival pressures, where hierarchy dictated access to vital resources. Status is not a single spectrum. Evolutionary psychologists have identified two mathematically independent strategies for attaining and maintaining social influence. This comparative UI illustrates the first path, dominance. Populations universally recognize its somatic markers: a downward head tilt, rigid facial expressions, and a physically expansive, space-claiming posture. Dominance is the phylogenetically older strategy, shared with other primates. It relies on intimidation, coercion, and the control of costs and benefits to force compliance from subordinates. On the right side is prestige. Its biological markers are distinct: an upward head tilt, a subtle smile, and an approachable posture that avoids any aggressive behaviors. Prestige is human-specific. It cannot be taken by force. It is acquired only when a group freely confers deference to an individual in exchange for demonstrated expertise and pro-social contributions. Influence requires a choice between two divergent evolutionary technologies: extracting compliance through fear or attracting deference through competence. These two strategies produce radically different organizational outcomes. The dominance pathway spikes cortisol, increases stress, and generates a fragile compliance that relies on constant monitoring. Contrast this with prestige, which generates long-term systemic alignment, pro-social behavior, and psychological durability within the team. This study, Plate, Glass, and Social Class, provides empirical evidence of how these status orientations drastically alter human decision-making. The findings show that individuals operating on the prestige pathway consistently make costly, pro-environmental choices. Their status relies on benefiting the collective group, making sustainable choices a viable signal of their value. Individuals on the dominance pathway show no such association, defaulting to self-interested, coercive exploitation of resources that prioritizes immediate individual gain. Eventually, the group punishes dominance. When a coercive leader commits an error, observers attribute malicious intent, whereas a prestigious leader is buffered by their history of pro-social contributions and perceived moral credentials. While a dominant posture can secure a room momentarily, only the biological indicators of prestige can sustain operational success over time. The management of interpersonal status is a hard biological science. It shapes our judgments and dictates the survival or collapse of human organizations.